to make his presentation.
University for inviting us to be present here, and also I'm delighted to see the students still fresh in their mind and face, and I'm glad that I'm here for the first time, but I saw some view of university just few minutes back. I'm sure you people are very fortunate to be here and do your best. Now, the topic that I'm given to speak or chose to speak is Indo-US nuclear cooperation, and specifically the restored phase and constraint. First and foremost, I'd like to make one statement. As for the United States as a superpower, hegemon, and right at the end of the war, having the only power that had a nuclear weapon, nuclear power capabilities, there was nothing that they could offer us in terms of cooperation as a gift. That also I needed for nothing. The superpower as an hegemon wanted to make, in the beginning 5 to 6 years, they had the monopoly of nuclear weapons, nuclear technology, and there was no intention to share with anything. This kind of nuclear cooperation never occurred to their mind or thought. So you have to see how this power finally conceded, finally, out of compulsion and need, provided nuclear cooperations. It is not just a charity that they offer to other nations. As any superpower, from the perspective of realism, wanted to have exclusiveness, no sharing. And in the first 6 years, you found, so long as monopoly of nuclear weapons, the American policymakers believed they had the ultimate weapon. They could decide any war that can emerge. Ultimately, they will be the deciding, as they did in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So that's the psyche in which they were working, and this worked very well till 1949. And a person like Kissinger, who wrote the Nuclear Weapons and Foreign Policy, said the policymakers never visualized that there would be a rival superpower, a rival nuclear power emerging before 1950, 1949 exploded. So there came the option of nuclear monopoly being lost, and Kissinger makes a major statement: the loss of territory was not so great as the loss of nuclear weapons of the United States. So now they need to work out how best. So they came out with all sort of, constraining, proliferation issues now talked about, because they don't want other powers to have the same benefit. And this continued till 1954. They came out for atomic power for peace. Atomic Power for Peace Act they passed. This is not out of charity. Now, when I read a lot on this aspect, the whole idea was, I presume, that the act that was passed in 1954, the American policymakers realized there are nations which are emerging, which had the scientific background, which had the scientific capabilities, and we need to pass laws whereby we accommodate them. So when we are in their country, we'll know how far the nuclear weapons or nuclear things are moved. So one of that country was India, because we had a powerful scientist called, Homi Bhabha, and that man he had a London group. Within the London group, he was very popular, and you fear between 52, 53, 54, he was working out a nuclear program for India. It is at that background that Eisenhower administration comes out with Atoms for Peace Act passed. So the whole exercise was, I presume, I need to find more. I'm working on that to find out. It was not out of charity. It is to accommodate these states within this purview of Atom for Peace in terms of nuclear cooperation, so that they could be there in the states, in these potential nuclear emerging technological states, and they would be able to monitor their programs and they would be right there, because assistance means you are there. Assistance means you're going to train. That is the program of 1954, Atoms for Peace, training them, sale of nuclear weapons. So out of that emerged the Tarapur reactor, which came into existence by 1962. And you see, during this entire period, there is no effort by the United States to share nuclear technology with other states. Only country it wanted to share was Britain. And the other countries, nuclear cooperation in terms of non-proliferation objective, not allowing to go in for so as to monitor. They don't enter nuclear weapon program, purely power program, to control that aspect. Countries like India became part of the nuclear cooperation. That's how the nuclear cooperation came into existence. And even, a country like France, which was part of the Manhattan Project, which began in 1943-44, which eventually brought the first nuclear bomb into existence. France, the cooperation with France was not there. Finally, in the year 1957-58, France, in collaboration with Israel had a technology. It had the technology of enriching enriching uranium. France had the technology of heavy water technology, which would use uranium in its common form, and out of that uranium plutonium. So this technology brought France and Israel together. And as you know, United States was not sensitive to get Israel within the non-proliferation. Over the years, it has been out of it, and we have, as Israel, a bomb in the basement. It already has, and France has already exploded. Now these countries have exploded, France, Britain, and then finally Chinese. And the Americans just sat and watched from the perspective of only non-proliferation aspects to be controlled. As I was reading Dennis Koch's book, I found there is a debate in the year right after the Chinese explosion. There was a feeling among the administration to provide India with nuclear weapons and deployment of nuclear weapons. Now the Americans were good in offering, but the point is, when you see the debate that goes in Europe, they are prepared to station nuclear weapons, but not allow them to control it. So within the allies itself, there was a debate that was emerged, the finger in the trigger, who will make the final drop of shooting. So you found over the years, as a hegemon, superpower, it is out of constraint, out of compulsion and need. That's my hypothesis, that they conceded one by one nuclear cooperation. When we exploded what you call PNE, Peaceful Nuclear Explosion, 1974, we were put on the doghouse. All the non-proliferation legislations came in, beginning with the Nuclear Supplies Group, Wassenaar Group, London Club. Everything were one after the other piled on us. It is out of camp. And so, from that till, the topic that I am taking, Indo-US nuclear cooperation came to a standstill. In the year when Carter became president, in the year 1968, he thought India would sign the full scope safeguard. He landed up in India, but Morarji Desai was so stubborn. He said, we have no intentions of nuclear weapons, so no need for us to sign, and that's the end of the story. So Carter was very disturbed. So from Carter's administration, 78 onwards. 78. So that is what 68 you had. 68 you had Nixon, and Carter administration 76, 77. So you had a full scope nuclear act passed by the US Congress. So that really brought the non-proliferation issue on issue of no more horizontal proliferation, and only vertical process could be done. Now, from 74 to 2004, we had a nuclear ban on us, nuclear cooperation was banned, and you had a regime that was emerged as a non-proliferation regime. And 2004 or 2005, you have a deal signed by the United States with Manmohan Singh government. And the surprising thing is, 10 years have passed. Nuclear deal and the act was passed in 2008. We are nowhere in operation. Now, my hypothesis, I would like to present certain hypotheses before. That how did this happen? The nuclear deal as it was 2005 was emerging. How did it happen? US current was only superpower and hegemon. Once again, with the collapse of the Soviet Union, the United States emerged as a superpower and hegemon. Political and military rise of China is feared by that. The morning we had a discussion on China. The question of China's rise was a major discussion in all their annual strategic reports, which began from 2002 during Bush administration onwards. And in 2002, India was identified important, global by the annual intelligence report. Now, based on that, based on the realist thinking, the assumption is the rise of China made America to think how to balance the China's dominance in Asia, possible dominance in Asia. So that I'm not talking of balancing. I'm talking of dominance that is emerging China such as India. So you invest. The other aspect of the investing increasingly on the countries on the periphery of China, so that you prevent the dominance of China in Asia. That is one aspect. The second, is a kind. This has been, stated and pointed out as congagement, CONGAGEMENT, as the policy of United States in this period, how to manage China, engage in other countries on the periphery. The second hypothesis that I would like to, the global war on terror was also another thing which brought India and US together, and Mr. Vajpayee, then Prime Minister in 2001, opening up, he said the military bases in India is open up to them. The second, these are strategic reasons why nuclear. This is larger interest of what I said, that the United States as a hegemon, as a realistic power, was not giving nuclear cooperation as a charity, but out of need and compulsion. The changing strategic scene in the global order contributed to this, and building on that, I take another. Iran's nuclear program was another which was causing more of a problem for America. So there was a realization, if we could enlist India in this program, we could bring in change in this scene itself. Third is, 9/11 really pushed US to improve relations with Pakistan. Really pushed improving relation, and Pakistan once again became important within the strategic arena of United States. And this made India also to be included. India could not be ignored in this whole process. So this is another thing that I would like, when I am just trying to understand why Bush administration was able to move in quicker deal rather than the other administration completely ignored the aspects. Then the last thing that I would like to present it as part of strategic cost. US-India nuclear deal, more in particular respect of non-proliferation. Problem Bush had was different view of proliferation. Bush administration had a different view of proliferation. Bush administration viewed proliferation from, there are good proliferators, there are bad proliferators. So India, as you say, on who previous administration looked from the all of them looked from the prospect of proliferation as one, and there is nothing. We also know there is not a good terrorist nor not bad terrorist. So there are not good proliferators and bad, but Bush tried to look from the prism of good terrorists, and they identified Iraq, Iran, and North Korea as bad terrorists, proliferationist, and India came under the important good proliferation because it exploded nuclear weapon in 98 May, declared nuclear weapon. Now, I had said, what is the aspect of the nuclear issue being recast, and the title that was given was the title that was restoration phase. 14 out of 22 nuclear reactors. This is a restoration phase. Hyde Act passed in 2006, which changed the Act of 1954, Atom for Peace, waiving India to go in for a nuclear commerce, signing of the so-called 123 agreement between India and IEA agreement between 1 September 2008, approved by the Indian Parliament, 123 agreement 2008, and approval of the deal with NSG September 2000, and finally the US-India nuclear cooperation approval deal. These are the things that we see in terms of US-India for policy, as we see in terms of restoration phase. The other phase, as we see, the restoration phase begins with Bush administration. Till that time, even up to the end of Clinton, as we mornings saw, he believed that proliferation has to be stopped, it should be capped, it should be rolled back and capped. That was the perspective. Although a breakthrough was made with Jaswant Singh and Philip Talbot in their negotiations, but those things did not bring into the level to directly discuss the nuclear issues. Now, what are the things, broadly I would like to summarize. What was, as morning we seen, Ambassador, Foreign Secretary Raj Singh made it clear, it is because of Bush only we could have the nuclear deal and nuclear part. And what does it mean? Now, Bush, having made the decision with the influence of Condoleezza Rice, Philip Zelskov, and Nicholas Byrne. Now, having made the decision that India, they need to go in for a nuclear proliferation, now he had to convince, while he had to change the domestic law. Second, he has to convince the international community on the exception they would give for India. All that Bush was attempting, and this was something which is essential for us to understand, a global nuclear order that he was trying to set up. International community had condemned India from 1968 onwards, 98 onwards to 2004, and you have unanimous resolution passed that India should sign CTBT, rollback missile, nuclear weapons, and all those things. So from 98 to 2008, international community had taken the position, either you have the nuclear weapons or you suffer nuclear exclusion, nuclear weapons exclusion, or boycott from all nuclear programs. But from July 2005 onwards, India could have, this is the change with decision made by Bush, had contributed that from 2005, when they signed the joint statement pronounced, India could have both a separate nuclear weapon program and civilian nuclear program, so long as they could dedicate so dedicate the nuclear power program under the international safeguard. So by 2008, under Bush, the nuclear cycle has been completed. A thing which was there in 1974, when India was put on the doghouse with all sort of non-proliferation issues, by 2008, it has been made part of a nuclear club itself. All these were worked out during Bush administration. One cannot ignore the Brijesh Mishra, also Condoleezza talks, which began in 2002, 2003, which became the basis of one major thing which developed and public came to know in 2005, the separation. It was the Brijesh Mishra made a statement in the Council of Foreign Affairs in May 2003 that for resolving this nuclear problem, there could be a separation of nuclear power and nuclear weapon reactors, and this would find a solution, an amendment. So he made it public, and this became the basis of 2005 agreement that started. Now, constraint. I'll just take a minute and finish the. Now, all has been done. By 2008, India has become, although there is no clearly, this also we need to, there is no clear statement India is a nuclear weapon state, which is what the 1968 Non-Proliferation Act makes it clear. Nuclear weapon state can proliferate or improve, but other states cannot, and they should not indulge in any kind of nuclear weapon program. So these acts, Hyde Act, as well as the Indo-US Nuclear Cooperation Act of 2008, does not refer to India as a nuclear weapon state. It recognizes the possession of the nuclear weapon state. Simultaneously, adversarial sections were included that the President will have to inform the Congress annually the status of the use of nuclear fissile material that is going to be transferred on nuclear commerce when the commerce actually begin. So you found that India, out of this whole deal, India is not, but there is a ipso facto recognition of India as a nuclear weapon state, or the term used was the term that was used was weapons, nuclear state, rather than state with nuclear weapons. State with nuclear weapon. So that was the term that, by and large, in the dialogues and dimensions of talking emerged. Finally, I like to say, all has been done. By 2010, by passing of the Liability Act, which was the requirement of the US-India Nuclear Act, we are now in a jinx. And the Liability Act, as far as when we see, is very good act. First time Indian Act has passed so as to make the supplier liability also responsible for any kind of nuclear damage that was done. The international convention then existing, as it is existing, has a clause which the operator, whoever operates the nuclear reactor, can, as a right of recourse, bring in the suppliers responsible for it. But our act provided that the nuclear supplier should also has a liability in case of any kind of nuclear damage, nuclear reactor going, accidents which is damaging. So this is where India, as it is referred as clause 17B of the act, which is standing in the way. Now I like to conclude, now this is where India is facing problem, and both Obama and Modi ji has to solve it. This is the solution which eventually, as I didn't have the time, as we see, as India moved into 2005 July, there were extensive discussion. Finally, it is the President Bush and Prime Minister Manmohan Singh finally made the decision which resulted in the nuclear deal and subsequently a nuclear act. So it is up to these two leaders, Indian leader and also Obama, to make a change in this suppliers deal. Where could they make a change? As of now, the act stands. It is open-ended. There is no mention how much the supplier should be responsible when their material fails, when their equipment fails, and all those things, and causing the damage. So this could be defined, and to that extent, a time period and also the damage limit could also be stated. Time period could also be stated. So it is up to this leadership now to make a breakthrough, because otherwise the whole thing is still in limbo, and we are not moving. We may have improved our relation with United States, but 10 years have passed. It is where we are today in 2005. Thank you.